Club members, it is nice to be with you again. We have another interesting theme on the horizon for the Champagne Club this month, and we're talking about abstinence. Not abstinence from drinking. I don't really advise taking champagne out of your diet or lifestyle. I'm talking about abstinence of certain techniques in the winemaking process. We'll be looking at two maisons, we'll be looking at Drappier, we'll be looking at Carbon, and some of the techniques that the winemakers have available to them to influence their style over their champagnes. In the maison of Drappier, we're looking at the abstinence of adding any sugar, so dosage, the final part of the influence that the winemaker has, as well as reducing sulfur. And in the Maison Carbon, we're looking at taking out malolactic fermentation. So yes, we're getting into the technical details of winemaking this month. The first producer that we're looking at this month is the Maison of Drappier. We're talking about a family-owned maison that has a very long history, very long pedigree in the region, all the way back to 1808. We've had generation after generation of family at the helm of the winemaking, and at the moment we've got Papa, Andre, we have Michel, and we have his children underneath him. So we've got a few hands on deck, shall we say, and an amazing transfer of knowledge from father to son and father to daughter. What I love about this house is that they are off the grid. So they're very, very, very highly focused on environmental properties within the vineyard. So much so that if we were to travel with our champagne tour to see Drappier, that they would calculate our carbon footprint, which is so very impressive. They are also very particular about something that others aren't, and that is the use of sulfur in their wines. Now, Michel Drappier and some of the members of the Maison do not bode well with sulfur. They don't like sulfur personally. They have an affliction to it, a reaction to it. So they try to reduce, if not eliminate, sulfur in all of their champagnes. And we'll talk more about that as we get to the wine. But 1808, little town of Euvie. Now we are in the south of Champagne. We're in the Côte de Bar. So when you're in the south of Champagne, we're opposite hemispheres. We have a slightly warmer temperature and we have a different subsoil. We are talking about Kimmeridgian clay and limestone. And in this particular pocket of Champagne, which is really quite far north, we're talking a couple of hours from the heart of Champagne, we specialize in the grape of Pinot Noir. We have beautiful aspects, and in fact, it's some of the most picturesque vineyards of the Champagne region, and often people don't make it there, which is a real shame. What I love about this house is the particular attention to detail at every stage of the winemaking process. We are seeing wooden eggs, we're seeing clay amphora, we're seeing glass demijohns where they're aging their dosage. But in the champagne that we're featuring this month, which is the low sulfur Brut Nature, we have a couple more techniques to add to this repertoire of interesting techniques that the winemaker has available to him. So the wine that we've selected for all of our champagne lovers this month, which is one of my favorites, and this is funny, every time this wine comes in, it goes straight out again. It has its fans in Australia and around the world. It is the Brut Nature, and there's two things that are happening within this wine that are quite interesting. Number one, zero added sugar. Now, sugar is added to champagne at two stages. The first stage, the liquor de tirage, which triggers the secondary fermentation inside the bottle. You cannot ignore this process. To get sparkling wine, you have to add sugar and yeast inside the bottle to trigger the second fermentation. But the yeast will eat all of those sugars and eventually the wine will be completely dry. At this juncture, once it's aged, the winemaker is choosing not to add any additional sugar to balance the wine or to sweeten the wine. So it is what it is. It is vine to wine and to your glass. And a lot of people add dosage to balance acidity, to bring a little flavor to the wine. This is not required in this wine. We've got beautiful, ripe, 100% Pinot Noir grapes, aged for 2 to 3 years, so not an extensive period of time, but no added sugar. So you are seeing the purity of the wine. You cannot do this unless you have great viticulture and great winemaking, because sugar can mask the winemaking process. It can, like putting makeup on a beautiful woman. No sugar added to this wine. Secondly, and perhaps more interestingly, is that we have very, very low parts of sulfur. Now, sulfur is a natural product. It can be added to champagne, to wine, to food, to meat, to stabilize the wine. It can be added at multiple points. It can be added when the fruit first comes into the vineyard. It can be added at secondary fermentation and added at the end of the winemaking process to stabilize the wine so that it doesn't spoil, so that you're not getting these off characteristics. It's a bit of an insurance policy for the winemaker to ensure that the wine stays stable throughout its life cycle, its exportation, etc. However, there is a theory, and some winemakers in Champagne and also in Burgundy and other parts around the world are saying that too much sulfur can actually restrain the aromatic properties of the wine. It can pull the wine down, it can bridle the wine. So by adding just a minimal amount of sulfur, we're getting the stabilization of the wine, but without squashing, inhibiting any of the beautiful characteristics of the champagne. 100% Pinot Noir. I think that this is a beautiful wine. It does not look austere in any sense of the word. You've got beautiful pear, you've got some hazelnut, you've got some almond, you've got some citrus, really soft citrus characteristics. It is quite mineral on the palate. It's a really rich, beautiful mouth-filling wine, despite there being no added sugar whatsoever. For me, this is a classic wine. I can see why its popularity exists amongst our customers. It's faultless. It's a beautiful wine. For having no sulfur and minimal sugar, it is what it is. It's perfection. Only good viticulture and good winemaking can do this to this particular champagne. And you can see why. It is 100% Pinot Noir and 100% perfect in the glass. So we've been a little bit indulgent this month for you, our connoisseurs. I always recommend having the connoisseur level of the club. You get to see the full gamut of the club and why we choose the things the way we choose them. Carbon was a very controversial house for us to import. As a team, we sit down with the sommelier panel, and as a team, and we rank all of the champagnes that come through based on samples without any bias. And it really is about the quality of the wine. And we sat down as a team with a few external parties and a few somms, and we assessed the samples that Carbon had sent us, and I have to say we were thoroughly impressed. Now, Carbon's very unique. Alexandre May, who's the founder, started with the house in 2011. He's 5 generations of winemaking family before him. So the house based in Champignon, the May de Vevray family, so very well-known family, a long pedigree in Champagne. But he decided to depart from what his father was doing and grandfather was doing and do his own thing. And he's an innovator and he's a pioneer, and he really has intersected the boundaries of modernity and tradition and given this bottle an incredible wrap. It is a carbon fiber bottle with this unique 37-point process, all done by hand. He says, Alexander, the founder, says that carbon is the form of life. It's carbon DNA, it's carbon dioxide in the wine, carbon's in everything. So there's a philosophy behind the house. But they also have a very strong automotive connection. They're in global partnership with Bugatti Automotive, which of course is made out of carbon fiber. They were the podium contract. So they have this long-standing connection with automotive, but the wines are great. We wouldn't import something where the aesthetic of the bottle outweighed the contents of what was inside. And I think that's super important. So we have, 5 generations of family. We've got Alexander as a winemaker with his father and 2 oenologists working together to create amazing champagnes. Most of the wine coming from Premier Cru and Grand Cru grapes. But in this particular house, we look at the idea of holding back malolactic fermentation. So very indulgently this month, because this is not a inexpensive champagne, we're bringing you the Brut from Carbon, which for me is a fantastic wine. You've got 46% Chardonnay, you've got 24% Pinot Noir, and you've got the balance, 30% being Pinot Meunier. You've got about 6 years in the cellar, so you've got a really lengthy time aging on lees, aging with those dead yeast cells inside the body of the wine to give this texture, to give this body. But what's interesting about this house is that they hold back malolactic fermentation. Not a sexy word, but in short, in wine, in grape must, you have really tart malic acids. And depending on how cool climate you are, and Champagne being very high northern latitude, so very cool climate, you've got quite high malic acid, which can be very bitey. You know, like the acid that you find in a Granny Smith acid, quite tart. And most producers in the Champagne region undergo this conversion. It's called MLF, the malolactic fermentation process, where they convert tart malic into softer, creamier acids. Now, why would you do this? 3 reasons. Number 1, stabilize the wine. That way, the wine's not going to go off and do spontaneous malolactic fermentation on its own down the line. Number 2, we de-acidify the wine. So we're bringing down that tart acid profile that is not pleasant to a lot of people. And thirdly, we're changing the profile of the wine. So we're making it softer, we're making it creamier. It changes the aromatic profile of the wine, but it also changes the texture and the feel on the mouth. But why would we refrain from doing malolactic fermentation? Well, if you feel that you want that fruity, crisp, acidic profile in the wine, or if your wine is destined for long-term aging and you want to maintain some of that acidity to give you a longer aging profile, then you might hold that back. And this is the same in a Riesling or a fruity wine where you really want to retain that original fruit profile. You would hold back that malic conversion process, and they've done that in Carbon. But I have to say, and I'm drinking these wines at room temperature, I thought the wine was outstanding. Chardonnay sings, the creaminess, lemon characters, the nougat, the honey. I mean, the wine is very soft, very approachable, very beautiful. And I've seen the wine in previous iterations where it has felt more zingy on the palate. It actually doesn't feel so zingy at the moment. I've had the stock in my cellar for about 6 months. It's had time to temper. It's a beautiful mouthfeel. You can see that the color is a lot more golden than the previous wine in the Drappier, where you've got more Pinot Noir, 100% Pinot Noir. So you've got this rich golden color and this more straw characteristic on the nose. But Carbon, a creaminess, a softness. There is a little bit of spice, so you can actually see barrel influence in the wine. There's a softness, there's a sort of almost an aniseed finish on the wine, but you've got this beautiful white flower, cantaloupe, melon characteristic on the nose, but powerful. You know, you really do have some power, some drive. What does give me the clue that there's lacking in malolactic acid is this welling of saliva. So the malic acid is reacting in my mouth and giving me this welling of saliva, but it's also giving me this refreshing mouth feel. A fantastic wine for food. You're getting the benefit of the roundness of the age and quality of the fruit, but with a cleansing of the palate. Great champagne. So sometimes in a champagne, we try a champagne and we go, how can, from the same region, same winemaking techniques, we think, can we have champagne that's so vastly different in character? It's not just where the fruit is coming from. It's not just how long it's aged for. It's not just what fruit it is. Is it Chardonnay? Is it Pinot Noir? The winemaker has a few tools available to him. Now, sometimes it can be putting things in and sometimes it can be holding things back. And that really is the theme of this month, is abstinence. In Drappier, we've abstained from adding any sugar, any dosage, so the final part of sweetening, and we've held back sulfur to give an unbridled, more characteristic champagne. And in the Carbon, we've held back the conversion of malolactic fermentation, tart malic into soft, creamy lactic acid like you find in milk and cheese, butter, but both with great result. These are intentional decisions. These are winemakers that know the style of what they want their wine to be. And when you are tasting champagne, it's good to understand some of the techniques available to the winemaker to give differentiations in style. That's why champagne can't be put in one category. That's why we have the club. It's to explore all the different dimensions, styles, and possibilities that champagne can bring. I hope you enjoyed the champagnes for this month. They were very indulgent. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode or in person at an event very soon.